Hi, good evening. I'm Zion D. Koto, and this is the Gist of Freedom alongside
Nicole Salter, his co-host for this segment.
And we are here with Mr. Keith Beauchamp, the filmmaker of The Story of Emmett Till. And we are also joined this evening by Michael Webb, the director of the International Youth Leadership Institute. Nicole?
Yes, we're here today to discuss a little bit of what your journey was making the film with respect to the generation that Zion represents. And I want to start first with Zion. Can you tell us, did you know anything about Emmett Till?
I had heard about Emmett Till at Brooklyn College, and I had heard about his story and particularly how disturbing it was, and I couldn't bring myself to look at the image that they showed us of the horrors of racism. So that's
what
my
specifically about
knowledge.
the story was most disturbing? Was it his death, or the reasons for his death, or
the reasons for his death
youth?
Were particularly disturbing, but it seemed, I guess, normal at that time period why they would want to have killed him. That was the mindset at that time period. But what was disturbing is how they went about killing him, particularly with such detail and hate and anger, which was particularly disturbing for me, I would have to say.
What has been your experience dealing with youth and your film, The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till?
I have to say that I'm very impressed that you know the story well, and it's amazing because everybody takes on this story in different ways. I travel the country and abroad telling the story of Emmett Till, so it's always interesting to me to hear when a person learned of the Emmett Till case for the first time. So thank you, Zion, for telling me your experience. Your Till moment is what we call it. But I was 10 years old when I first came across the Jet magazine of Emmett Till. I was in my parents' study.
Wow.
And I pulled out this Jet, and here's this magazine. I see this cute face of this young boy, mirror image of such as myself, and then on this other side of the page, there's this horrific face of this monster. So my parents was just so happy they were walking by, and they see me with this magazine, and they come in and explain the story to me. But I grew up in the deep south of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It became an educational tool to teach me about the racism that still lurks in America today. So my experience has been, Till has been a part of me most of my life. You mentioned the untold story of Emmett Lewis Till earlier. That was a big effort for me, a big effort in terms of giving me direction and in terms of me identifying my calling in life. I was 22 years old when I began research to tell the story of Emmett Till, and I'm 44 years old. And so this year for me, it's sort of, my life is coming full circle. Here was this young boy that sort of my kindred spirit in many ways. I can never shake that image out of my head. And when I ended up meeting the late Mamie Till Mobley, his mother, she put me under her wing, and she nurtured me into this activist I've become. And so my whole life has been about telling the importance of this story and really reaching young people. And the reason why I reach these young people so much is because of the age of Emmett Till.
Yes.
We can all identify with being 14 years old. And here was this young man, had a whole life ahead of him, but his life is cut short for a simple act, a whistle.
Mr. Webb, what was your, to steal your coinage, your Till moment? And how does that relate to the work that you do with the International Youth Leadership Institute?
Well, I remember we were contemporaries. We were around the same age. So, in that time, I was just a kid myself. And I remember that the way my parents processed that whole moment was to scare us. They wanted us to be subservient, obedient, to avoid any kind of contact that would put us in harm's way. And so we were sort of raised that way. Unwittingly, they were trying to take something out of us that we needed to have, some power and fire, but they were doing it because of love. They wanted us not to react, and they wanted to make sure that when we encountered white people, that we kept our distance, we were respectful. I mean, these are the things they told us.
Well,
now, of course,
Zion,
we didn't do it.
Are these things that you hear today in your generation, people, as particularly African American male youth, but not exclusively, having that kind of talk from their authority figures in their community or their parents about how to protect themselves in outside company?
Not quite for me in my experience, because I know we were always taught to appreciate each other and never base someone on color. So we were always taught to interact with people and never judge people by the color of their skin. But I've never had, and it's interesting to say, an exclusive conversation about what to do in a situation like that or how to avoid certain situations along those lines.
I think it's interesting that you're both talking about this. This is what we call the blackmail code.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Southern black men has dealt with that throughout their lives. And I was one of those men who grew up in a household where my parents instilled in me the importance of understanding Southern mores and making sure you don't step out of that line. And it's just, it's amazing because even now today, we're now teaching our young folks the blackmail code, and it's just terrible that we're living in this day and time where we have to continue to have these teaching moments.
Give us an example of a blackmail code. For one, the hoodie.
Well, blackmail code is not necessarily a hoodie.
No.
Blackmail code is actually just instructions on how we should carry ourselves in a white dominant society. And so, it's different wherever you go, but it's the same premise because the South is different than the North.
Definitely.
But
in some ways
and
it's
and I'm about
not.
to correct myself because when I moved here a good 20 years ago, I see more racism here up north than I do down south. And that baffles people when I talk about it. But I'm able to identify those things before a lot of people who have never experienced the Southern way of life. But
Is not the male code also about making sure that our young people, not just young men, but young people have language to process the experience before it occurs? Because it is something that is not necessarily a logical, like you were raised in an environment where you're asked to not judge people by the color of their skin. So when you're being judged for the color of your skin, it takes a while to process what's going on and how you should or should not respond. And sometimes that response time or that reaction time is a privilege to have. You don't always get to have it. I know that my co-host here wanted to ask some questions. I want to make sure that he has some time to ask the gentleman anything that you want to know.
So, Mr. Beauchamp, I wanted to know exactly what were the challenges that you faced trying to get this program off the ground?
Well, there were many challenges. Being young, I was 22 years old at the time. Dealing with a 50-year-old murder case. It was a 40-something-year-old murder case at the time I was pursuing it. But dealing with a case that was before my time and having to prove why it was important to tell the story and to go after, to get justice for Emmett Till. And that was the most frustrating moment, I have to say, in my life, because it was at a time where we as African Americans were in our households talking about the films that were being produced about the African American experience. We were talking about making sure that those who don't look like us continue to tell those stories. We need to tell our own stories. And so it was quite frustrating for me because here I am, an unintentional filmmaker, I have to say, because I never thought I would be doing this work. I was hoping to become a civil rights attorney. And so it was through my quest to tell this story, my parents realized so much passion I had with this particular subject, where they actually gave me the financing I was supposed to go to law school with to produce Till. And so that's how the untold story of Emmett Lewis Till was actually produced. It was financed by my parents because I went to everyone, a lot of movers and shakers. No one believed in it. No one even believed that I would be able to get the Till case reopened. I never believed it myself, I have to say, in that moment and dealing with the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. But she is the one who became my inspiration and instilled in me those values that is needed to get me through. And it was in May 10, 2004, our dream came true when the case was reopened, and my whole life changed.
Wow.
And it was from that, from the reopening of the case, where I began to work closely with the FBI and their Civil Rights Division with Civil Rights Cold cases. The reopening of the Till case sparked the Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative, which we were going back and looking at unsolved civil rights murder cases from the civil rights era to review them and to see if they warrant new investigations and prosecutions. That led me to have my first television series, Murder in Black and White, which was hosted by Reverend Al Sharpton for TV One Networks, and it was the first project that was done under collaboration with the FBI. And it led me to other projects for television, all the way up to my television series now, The Injustice Files, which is, I feel, is an extension of my body of work. But The Injustice Files on investigation discovery, and I still continue to deal with unsolved civil rights murder cases as well as deal with injustices in general.
As a final question, I want to make sure I get an answer. I give the opportunity of the platform to speak for all three men. What does justice in the case of Emmett Till, justice in the Black Lives Matter movement, or justice in a broader sense mean for you? And what would justice in the case of Emmett Till mean for you today?
Justice would be having the outcome of a case not be automatically thrown away just because of the color of someone's skin. Justice would be convictions for some of the senseless and horrible things that have happened to African Americans on parts of many people in society, whether or not criminals, racists, or the police in general. Justice would be having to definitely walk out of a case knowing that they were a clear mind and everything was considered and the color of someone's skin was not the reason why they didn't get what was the right outcome. And justice in the Emmett Till case would be the people who murdered him would be tried, prosecuted, and go to prison for what they did.
Mr. Beauchamp?
Well, justice for me, that's, wow. I grew into this work, and I've looked at justice in many ways. I've dealt with many families who suffered losing their loved ones during the civil rights era, and of course, presently. People take on pain differently, I have to say. And I used to be this bloodthirsty kid when I first started, but I got a chance to understand the pain and the humanity in which we live. So justice for me is what's extremely important for me, is making sure that we preserve the names of those who lost their lives. And because as you continue to speak their names and remember them, that's true justice. We're speaking of Till today, and I have to leave it off quickly with something that the late Mamie Till Mobley always said to me. She said to me, "Keith, you must continue to tell Emmett Till's story until man's consciousness is risen, because only then there will be justice for Emmett Till." And what she was saying was, we have to continue to speak Emmett Till's name. We have to continue to learn his story in order for us to move collectively towards the future. And as we see now, we see that this story is even more important than ever.
Mr. Webb?
I think when we understand and we accept the legacy of racism that we've had to endure in this country, and we're able to talk about it openly and really, then we'll have justice. Right now, we haven't got to that point yet. We still can have a conversation.
Yes. Well, I want to say thank you so much to the three of you for opening your hearts to have this conversation on this platform where you can be honest and forthright. I want to give a special shout out to our co-host here, Zion Dakota.
Thank you.
You did a wonderful job.
Yes.
And Mr. Beauchamp and Mr. Webb, thank you for the work that you're doing outside of this platform, and I hope that this platform brings even more attention to that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the both of you.